Good morning, everybody. I think a couple of people are still joining, but we will go ahead and start anyways. Yes, good morning. My name is Saifullah Khan. I am an investment associate at Beehive, and I will be hosting today's webinar. Before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask if everyone can make sure their microphone is muted and their camera is off, please. And first and foremost, thank you for everybody for joining this morning's webinar. We hope it is both insightful and engaging. We'd also love to hear any thoughts, any questions you may have during the discussion. So please, through the chat icon on the top right of the screen, just type any questions and send them across, and we will answer it at the Q&A at the end of the session. So today's talk is going to be about managing an SME in a time of crisis. And obviously, with the crisis we're in currently being very unique and with the duration of it being unknown, we just hope to shed some insight into responses that we've seen SMEs having to take in this crisis. So obviously, this will vary depending on industry, but we aim to be quite generic for it to be applicable to you all. But please, if you have any specific questions, just go ahead and fire them across on the chat icon. So today's panel to discuss the topics, we have our UAE country manager, Andy Bell, and he will be discussing both internal and external communication and what the best practices are for that. As well as that, he will be touching on cash flow and how to manage your cash flow position during these times. Following from that, we'll have Suraj Gopal, our investment director, talking about how to deal with supply chain issues and also how to best deal with customers. Because obviously it's an all Beehive panel, we will also be discussing how Beehive are supporting SMEs given the current market conditions. And we will finally get onto Geeta, our head of compliance, to talk about any relevant updates and sources in which you can find the latest regulations to keep up to date with. So I want to get into it now and just start with the first point on communication. And obviously, as I'm sure you're all aware, proactive communication is so important to all stakeholders in the business ecosystem, but perhaps most important with your employees. So Andy, I wanted to ask you, firstly, how transparent should a business be to their employees about the scale of the impacts on the business?
Yeah, sure. So morning all, firstly, and then onto your question, Saf. So I think in these uncertain times, I think it's a good idea to give your staff some form of certainty, and where better to do this than with their job itself. And with that being said, I mean, by letting all staff know the current and potential impacts of COVID-19 on the business, you're letting staff know that you're being proactive. You're looking to safeguard the business. You're looking to safeguard its team. And I think the team will really appreciate that you value them enough to involve them in these discussions. I would say, don't overdo it. Don't look at the market concerns, look at the business specific concerns, and look at these for the next 30 to 60 days and create a rolling plan, and then communicate this with the whole team at once.
Thank you. And obviously, yeah, that generic communication is so important to the whole team to kind of rally them together. But to drill it down further, how does communication need to be tailored to different departments respectively and guide their plan of action through these times?
Sure. So I'd say as a business, you need to think about your key operating areas right now and how these are currently coping under the current restrictions. From here, I think you can then see what areas are either over-resourced or under-resourced. And very few businesses will be operating at full capacity right now. And the departments in these businesses that will, like I say, probably need further assistance. So the best place to look for this assistance is by reorganizing the team internally. This creates that goal congruence within the team, strengthen the team or strengthen the business. I understand that not everyone will be able to do everyone else's role, but they may be able to do a proportion of their role. They may be able to do 20, 30, 40% to assist the team that are currently struggling, and to put to work the people that, through no fault of their own, are currently less busy right now. But I'd say let your individual area managers feed into this. Let them tell you who's busy, where they're struggling, what's happening. Involve the whole team, but involve the whole team through their managers. Let the managers feed back to you, and as top management, see where to move people around.
Sure, and obviously, managers of companies have enough on their plate, and as well as that, they are too uncertain about the duration of this crisis and what the effects are. But how frequent should communication be back down to the team leaders and all the way down to the employees as well?
Yeah, so I think you should aim to update your key managers as top management on a weekly basis right now, or when in new announcements made in the market, say by the government. I'd then try and get your team leaders that you've obviously passed information down to do what you were doing pre-COVID-19. Sit with the team weekly, come up with this week's plan and strategy. I think that's something that you should continue through these times. But I think top management should also speak to these team members. They should speak to the whole team, probably on a bi-monthly basis, just so the rest of the team's confident that management's still involved, management's still committed. I think that's kind of the best thing you can do for the team right now, is just keep everyone up to date, everyone not second guessing, people not hearing rumors from other people. Let top management tell people the clear current situation. I think you should also look at updating other people as well. So look at stakeholders of the business, such as shareholders, lenders, suppliers, customers. What are you saying to these guys, and what are you saying to the market in general?
Sure, thank you for that. And obviously, most companies are, having to work from home at the moment. What employee support initiatives should be in place to make sure everybody's got access to the right resources, and to make sure everybody sort of knows what their role is going to be over the coming months?
Yeah, so I think this comes from the strategy of these meetings that you're going to have, and the communication you're going to pass out to the team. So I think, we've all got business continuity plans that we've had before. Okay, we haven't really tested them previously, but this is a good time to test it. Make sure that you're communicating with the team, you're getting that feedback from the team. So if anyone's struggling, they should be passing that back to you. And as you see in especially the departments that are, probably under resourced right now and are working at full rate, then these guys, are probably guys who are going to fall over first if something is to happen. So make sure you're talking to these guys in priority. Make sure you're asking them, do they have everything they need to do what they need to do? And if they don't, how can you manage that? Can you assist with phone top-ups? Can you assist with, upgrading internet and these kind of things? So I think most people have been working at home for long enough now that if they're able to do so, they're probably, well up to speed with it. But again, there's still constant improvements to be made. So make sure when you're having these meetings, make sure you're getting all the information from your team, and make sure you're looking at, potential solutions.
Sure, thanks for touching on those points. I want to move on to dealing with cash flow issues, and obviously this is a tangible effect a lot of SMEs are actually seeing. Obviously, the typical case being, less revenue coming in while the outgoings remain near enough the same. And sort of a global response, and what we're seeing across the board is businesses laying off employees, or at least reducing pay and adjusting their schedules. And obviously, in most cases, these initial measures are necessary. But I wanted to ask, how can an SME define which areas of the business to make cuts to? And also, how can they differentiate between, do I need to lay off staff completely, or can we just adjust their pay and schedule going forward for the next couple of months?
Yeah, of course. I think businesses should do their utmost right now just to safeguard jobs where possible. I know it's not always possible, but where it is, please try and do so. As we all know, the measures taken globally are only temporary, and we do hope that the downturn is too. So hopefully we can see an uplift, if not just locally, but globally, relatively soon. And as such, businesses will need their full operational capacity, when we see the uplift. So as a experienced team with a varied skills, you don't want to lose anyone in that team. You know, if you end up missing a key element kind of during the uplift, you may struggle to kind of hit the ground running and come back up to speed quickly. So try and safeguard the team where possible. So like you said before, I think, you know, adjusting people's pay and schedules is probably the best way to start. You know, try and look at a team-wide, you know, kind of pay cut, and potentially then, like you said, you know, potentially move their schedule in line with this. So if you go to a 3-day week, if you go to a 4-day week, whatever that looks like, to make sure that you can still operate well by restructuring the team like we spoke about previously, trying to get some of the other team members that are less busy to work. But also then, if that's not possible, try and look at other alternatives before you just go to get rid of a staff member. Try and look at making them take unpaid leave or taking their holiday for the year right now during these times, because ultimately people need to have their visas in place to be able to stay here. And equally, I mean, it's something Geeta will probably cover later on, but when you are looking to make redundancies in the current market, there are hidden costs right now that the government's brought in to protect employees and to stop them being, you know, high and dry when they've been cut by certain employers. So there are different, you know, costs right now that you will incur, which you wouldn't have done if you were to do it, say, outside of COVID-19. So just make sure you're aware of everything, and that, you know, of course you need to bolster the business right now. Of course you need to, you know, offset the expenditure with the revenue that you're actually receiving in. So do be sensible about it, but also try and look for something. And like we said before, give certainty to your staff. You know, if you come up with a plan, come up with this plan for the next 30 or 60 days. Don't do something that's changing weekly, because, you know, your team won't be motivated. They'll struggle to still work well, knowing that, you know, they may be cut next week. So please keep that in mind.
And that goes into my next question of, in the case of, you know, working hours being adjusted and pay cuts being put in place, how can this be best communicated to the staff to ensure, you know, morale and productivity remain high? And also, yeah, just to make sure that team spirit is there.
Yeah, well, I think if you go with the reduced hours, or, you know, kind of full team reduction in salary, I think that'll create a bit of that, like I say, that team mentality of everyone's in it together, as opposed to just certain departments are being hit harder than others, which isn't always great for the team. So I think by having that goal congruence within the team, that everyone's in it together, everyone knows it's temporary, everyone's doing their utmost to ensure that the business is operational and will be very successful going forwards, you know, by having the full team that it had before. I think that's really important to make sure that that morale stays there. I think with having, you know, the communication we spoke about in place and feeding into the team and listening to the team as well, I think the team will feel valued, and, you know, they'll be less likely to not want to work, not want to do stuff. I mean, ultimately, everyone's sat at home right now, working from home. It's tough for everyone, but, you know, I think most people are quite fortunate to be in a job. People are, you know, kind of grateful to be in a job, and people want to do the best, and, you know, they want to do the best for themselves and the families, but also for their employers and the rest of the team in that business. So I think that's probably the best way to do it. And when you're looking at, you know, cutting people's salary, yes, it is something that people don't always take well to. But if you're worried about losing staff due to reducing the whole team's salary, or pay for a certain department that's just not working, to try and safeguard the jobs within the business, I think you're unnecessarily worrying, because ultimately you're doing your best right now. You're never going to make a decision that everyone agrees with. And if they don't agree, these are probably staff members that, you know, they have an issue with management anyway. You know, they've been looking to move for a while, and this is just a catalyst for it. So the uplift, and, you know, as we come out of COVID-19's restrictions, they'll probably be looking for a job anyway. So you will naturally have a little bit of employee burn, unfortunately, but that happens any time of year. It's not going to be COVID-19 related, I don't think.
And aside from the workforce, obviously, where else in the business, you know, can you seek to make cuts, and what metrics can be used to identify whether or not an expense is necessary to the business?
Yeah, I think, you know, this will vary massively industry to industry and business to business, especially right now. But I think, you should firstly, look at your business essentials, making sure you have enough cash in the bank to cover these business essentials, because ultimately these are what keeps the door open at the end of the day. So these will be rental of premises, rental of vehicles, on hire purchase, etc. These will be utilities, wages that we just spoke about. So make sure you have enough cash in the bank for these. But like I say, there's always a conversation to be had. Most of these will have been paid in advance when it comes to rental of premises and stuff. But you may be up for renewal soon. There may be a conversation to be had. Can you make a deferral on your vehicles? Can you make a deferral on your rental up until Q3, Q4 of this year? Can you do something for a reduction? People would rather help where they can right now, as opposed to just see empty premises or kind of leases called in. So, and like we already spoke about, speak to your staff, see if there's something you can do there that keeps the team motivated, but also offsets the costs against the revenue. But then I'd also look at your variable costs or your non-essentials. Look at anything that you've got planned in your budget. Did you have some capital expenditure planned? Were you looking to buy a machine? Were you looking to buy a new asset? Ultimately, right now, will you get the full return on investment from that expenditure? Probably not. So can you defer that again to later in the year or to next year, or can you just do without it altogether? I mean, marketing is another one of these costs, which is essential to any business, but ultimately, there's normally a little bit of fat in there that you're building, and you normally have a few promos that you do throughout the year. These may be for Ramadan, or it may be for anything else. So is it the best thing to spend that money right now with the downturn that we're seeing? Probably not. So can you defer that cost as well? Can you defer something like that? And if you are doing very, very well right now, which hopefully people are doing, then are you looking to hire new staff? Is there a way that you can do this cheaper? Can you not go through a recruiter? Can you do this via word of mouth, or can you do this through referrals from your employees themselves? And I think these are kind of the high level areas where people can look at, try and save some cost, or just kind of recutting that budget that you probably did at the back end of last year.
And on the note of budget and also cash flow forecasts that people had in place being no longer relevant, how important is it, and how can a business be documenting in real time their cash flow position?
Yeah, so I think it's very, very important, especially for top management, to be concentrating on cash flow at the moment. I mean, it's the thing that's going to keep the doors open for the coming months, and it's what we all need to be concentrating and putting our best efforts into. So I think keep it simple it would be my advice, though. You need to create a forward-looking rolling cash flow, which you're updating regularly. It might be on a weekly basis, bi-monthly, monthly, whatever it is. Don't leave it too long. It's better to have more information than less right now. The first thing you need to do, though, is work out where you currently are. What cash do you have right now? What cash flows are you expecting in the coming months? It's also important to be realistic when it comes to these inflows, recognizing that there will be delays. Not everyone will pay on time every time, So do some stress testing on these figures, do some discounting of them. If it's 60% of receivables expected, put that in, factor it in, but have a cash flow for what you expect and what you're aiming for, but also have a worst case, just to make sure if everything does go south, are you in a position where you're, as an individual, as an owner of a business, you're not in a detrimental position personally. If the business doesn't have enough cash to cover key costs such as end of service, people can go after you personally. So make sure that you're not trading below minimums. Make sure you know what your minimum cash in the bank is and your minimum cash cover is, and try not to go below that. Make sure that like I say, worst case, but if a business is to go into decline and you're going to have to close for good, make sure that the employees are protected. Make sure you're protected, and just I think that's probably the key information I'd say right now. Is just keep it simple, keep it rolling, and just high level figures, but try and make sure that you're doing this on a regular basis. And if you don't have anything like this currently, then just a template in Excel is fine. That's absolutely fine. There's no issue with that whatsoever. You don't need any bespoke software. And if you're struggling to create a template yourself, just go to Google or somewhere like that, type in the business that you're in, the sector that you're in, type in cash flow. There'll be plenty of Excel documents on there for you just to kind of download, have a play with, and see how you get on.
Sure, thank you, Andy. There are some great points there. And to the audience, please, if you do have any questions relating to either cash flow issues or communication, just send them across, and we'll come back to Andy towards the end. I want to move on now to dealing with supply chain and customers. And Suraj, I'll come to you. And obviously, during these times, most companies are likely to experience significant disruption to their operations, and natural disruption to their supply chain, production commitments. And in the worst case scenario, this could lead to some legal disputes and trouble. So my question is, how can an SME best conduct contract risk assessment and manage contract disputes in these times?
Thank you, Saif, and good morning, everyone. So to understand how companies can look at the contract risk assessment, it's important to look at what are the external and the internal risk factors. So you could, for example, look at client contracts or supplier contracts. For that reason, even your third-party partnerships and bank contracts from an external point of view, and see if it is from a local or an international perspective, what are the effects or the risks that could impact the proper functioning of these alliances. And for example, if a client contract is at a place where they find that there's going to be delay in your receivables, you can always look for trade insurance receivables or trade receivable insurance that is being given out by some of the companies in UAE. If you're looking at suppliers being affected in countries where they're operating, you could look at alternative suppliers. I know it would be a little time pressed for now, but you could always look for local suppliers and support them as well in that sense. If you look at the internal risk, Andy had already highlighted saying that key people. So for SMEs, the employees are an asset to an extent where a business is made or broken based on the key people at a certain point in time being in the business. So if you find that probably the current sentiments or any decisions that you're making in terms of a salary reduction might impact some of the key people, give them an incentive or a motivation to look forward to in the future. So a portion of a percentage of the profit, if they are bringing any new businesses to the company, or looking at a good bonus structure if they are ending up on a good note at the end of the year, it will keep them driven. Also, it will also get them out the business development side of their skill set, try to bring in, because everybody in this on the personal or the professional sphere of their life have connections or networks that they can utilize. Now, once you have looked at your internal and external risk, you need to score and prioritize which ones are more crucial, which one needs to be addressed faster, and then move accordingly to see how you can kind of tackle this on a timely fashion. Now, hello, Saif.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Suraj. And on that point as well, just obviously that in doing that exercise itself, it would highlight to the SME sort of how important it is to get the full network support, be it on the customer side or on the supplier side. So a question just in terms of how can an SME best collaborate with their suppliers during these times to make sure business continuity on both sides, and how can they negotiate if needed?
Surely. So I believe when you are constrained or when you are necessitated, you need to innovate or collaborate further and adapt to the given situation. So one of the ways you can always, right now, cash is the essence. So you have to preserve as much of cash in the business, reduce the outflows. You can look at the first basic thing that you can do is talk to the suppliers. They are all equally affected, if not, or they know what is the scenario like, and they could definitely give you extended credit terms, which would help you to ease out the current situation. You could also look at long-term contracts with certain suppliers, because most of the SMEs might be engaging in a 1-year contract or a 6-monthly contract, depending on the seasonality of the business or the nature of the business. But once you have given the supplier probably a 3 to 5 years kind of forward-looking contract where they can also see revenue coming in the next couple of years on a steady fashion, they'll be more than happy to increase their credit terms or reduce the pricing based on the bulk purchase concept. So it depends on how you want to fashion it. One of the factors which always helps is also, if you're not looking at currency trade and you're looking at, say, for example, a barter kind of a relationship with some of the SMEs in your business groups or some of the clients that you're interacting with. Just for an example's sake, if you are a marketing or an advertising company and you have a training institution or an IT service provider who's working as from a supplier point of view, you can always engage, because you're a marketing company, you can always look at crisis management as one of your skill set. You can engage with these companies to help them come out of this crisis in terms of giving proper information to their clients in return for the services that they're giving. So that way you can preserve cash outflow to an extent. And always, I mean, right now, even in the current situation, you can always look at your network. Communication is happening as it is. It is more prominent because you're pretty much based at home. So you can try to open up your business networks, support the other businesses, and in turn, you will also get the favors. So that way, you can definitely look at getting new probably clients for your suppliers, and they would actually reciprocate by giving you better options on your current payments or future contracts that you're looking forward to.
Thank you, Suraj. And yeah, I think some important points there, and it'll be interesting to see in the future if this does, spur any innovation on the side of SMEs, and they keep a more agile approach to their supply chain, and also maybe leverage some digital ecosystems to have that backup there should they need it. My question for you in regards to communicating with customers, you know, obviously with these operational difficulties that some businesses may be experiencing, to service demand in normal fashion would be quite difficult. So my question is, how do businesses go about managing these expectations with their customers while at the same time upholding their brand reputation?
All right. So, I mean, the collaboration or the communication with the clients as well. If you look at how a company can manage their expectations and still keep the brand reputation, again, the communication factor is the biggest key. And like it or not, for many businesses, the point of starting digital engagement with your clients has been delayed for multiple reasons. But right now is the time to just go on with it. Get yourself in the digital channels, social media handles, so that you can actually communicate with your clients much better. You can actually broadcast messages relevant to your client base or to attract newer market segments at much economical fashion and much faster pace compared to the conventional models. And just to step back a little bit on one of the points where you can actually engage with your client better is and also get more cash into your business given the current circumstances is offering early payment plan solutions, where a client can actually pay you back earlier than committed if you are giving them a certain amount of discount. And it also works the other way around. If you have payments to a supplier, you can offer to pay early with a certain discount. That always allows cash preservations within the business. And with the clients, you can always collaborate more in terms you're communicating with them. And SMEs are smaller entities, so the level of communication is much higher. You can always look at extending the wallet share. So as I was saying, a marketing company or a company that is into PR activities can actually look at crisis management for the same company. And even if the project size or the project scope is reducing on one way, it can always increase in the other fashion. So I believe it's about the communication, it's about digital engagement, and you can always go into the social media handles, use the emails more extensively, SMS or WhatsApp, depending on what your customer forte is and what is the nature of your business. But keeping the communication lines active and steady will always help keep the expectations and the brand reputation at a high level.
Thank you, Suraj. And obviously, with a full Beehive panel, it would be great to just let the audience know what's Beehive's approach to funding SMEs in the current market.
So, I mean, Beehive, in its sense itself, is an SME to look at, and we know the heartbeats, how the SMEs operate. We are here to support SMEs as much as possible. And given the current situation, we are trying to help our existing client base to see how we can help them maneuver or navigate through this current timelines and help meet their expectations. So we are definitely here to help. And if there's anything that you would like to know beyond what is happening in terms of the webinar, or you want to get in touch in terms of an early payment plan kind of a thing, how that can be done, you can reach us back on the email addresses which will be given at the end of the presentation. So that way we can definitely look at how we can be more personalized in our answering to certain businesses and sectors.
Thank you, Suraj. Some great points there. And there are a couple of questions, so we'll be coming back to you at the end. I want to just move on now to Geeta and talk about procedures and government guideline. And she will allude a bit more to some newly passed regulations and important news for SMEs to be following during these times.
Hi, Saf. Thank you. I was just going to go over basically the general kind of updates that have been issued from the government. As everyone is aware, obviously current curfew applies, but I just wanted to go through the recent resolutions that were issued. Following the webinar, we'll also be sending through some useful links and also highlighting where to get your different bits of information from. I appreciate that will be different for different businesses, so I'll just run through these and then I can address any questions in the Q&A. So in terms of what stands when the curfew is lifted, so Ministry of Human Resources has issued a resolution which basically talks about remote working and what should be done in the workplace and with employees when we do eventually get back to work. So just to highlight a few main points, the resolution that's currently issued mentions that 30% of an employer's workforce can work from the employer's premises. There are various requirements that need to be adhered to. So, for example, individuals should sit far away from each other, so to maintain social distancing. The workplace should be cleaned twice a day. Individuals' temperatures should be checked at least twice a day. And if there is going to be a shift pattern or rotation for employees to come into the office, remote working facilities should be prioritized for more vulnerable people, like, for example, people with chronic illnesses or anybody who's pregnant, elderly people. So obviously this should be considered once people do get back into the workplace. Another thing that I wanted to touch upon is the employment update that was also issued by the Ministry of Human Resources. So this also talks about, worst case scenario, if a business does need to cut costs through employees, this can be done through various different ways. So, for example, I'll give you the different points that have been highlighted in the resolution, and it is expected that these are followed in that sequence. How this will be enforced, we don't really know at the moment, but I'll just go through the main points. So initially, a company will go through remote working, then paid leave, unpaid leave, temporary reduction of salary, or a permanent reduction of salary. So the resolution expects that these measures are implemented gradually, and with starting with remote working and ending with a permanent reduction in salary. Then it also talks about in this time where companies may have a surplus of expat employees. And the resolution then addresses that by the fact that employees could be shared between different employers, so could be rotated to different companies in different free zones. And there is a virtual labor market system that would enable this. So this is just, like I say, in the worst case scenario, there are different steps that need to be considered by the employer. At the moment, there's different sources available which mention that This could be applicable to basically all the UA private sector. However, ADGM and DIFC are definitely excluded from that at the moment. So I'll be sending through different links that cover these points. Then another thing that was issued as well is the early leave initiative. I mean, most of you will have already heard about this in the press, but just wanted to go over the different highlights. When it comes to the early leave initiative, again, that's been issued by the same Ministry of Human Resources. So, for example, for expats, they've initiated the early leave initiative. So therefore, employers and an employee can agree on a period of unpaid leave due to the current situation. So therefore, then the employer is obliged to book and pay for the cost of a return flight to the employee's home country. But obviously only if the flight is available. And as we all know, at the moment, there's only outbound flights. So therefore, I did query this with the ministry a couple of days ago. And they did mention, we had this as a question in the last webinar as well, where then the outbound flight is covered by the employer and an agreement is made to also cover the cost for the return flights when the employee is meant to be returning. So I just obviously wanted to highlight a couple of different things here, and I'll be happy to give any further answers in the Q&A. A couple of things that I also wanted to go over is which sources to follow, especially on social media has some really good channels as to where to get your information from. So again, I'll be highlighting this after the webinar, but if you want to sign up to, for example, if you're on Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn, they're a good source for up-to-date news and any new guidelines issued. So good entities to follow are, for example, Dubai Police, the Dubai Government Media Office, and Dubai Health Authority. Obviously, in Abu Dhabi, that would be the Abu Dhabi Health Authority. So those are good channels to follow. Also Gulf News in terms of email updates. You can get 3 emails a day on current updates. And that's how most of us probably have been receiving any curfew updates or COVID-19 updates. Then another thing that I personally found useful is signing up to different UA law firms and auditor firm updates, because they will provide you with any kind of tax COVID-19 updates, or they'll give you, for example, an easier interpretation of the different government procedures in place. So I'll share everything after the webinar. That's it from me, Saf.
Thank you, Geeta. Yeah, it would be great to share some of those sources with the audience, just so they can keep up to date with the most relevant news that they need to be aware of. Thank you for that overview. I want to now move on to the Q&A. We have a couple of questions in the chat box. So just to start, a question from Pranav. What points should be taken care of while doing a projection for the next 2 years? Andy, I'm going to hand this one over to you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think good question. I think this varies between whether you're looking to do an external facing projection or internal. Is this just for you, or is this for something to go to as part of an equity or debt raise? If so, don't be too harsh on it. Ultimately, kind of in both scenarios, don't be too harsh. So the whole point of your projections is to try and give you a realistic position of where you will be in a year or 2 years from now. So right now, we're not sure how long the effects of COVID-19 will last, but we know they're only going to be temporary. So a lot of people right now are looking for an uplift in Q3, Q4 of this year. So take that into account. Maybe prepare a couple that, if COVID-19 goes up to October, if it goes up to November, wherever that sits in yours. And then don't be too ambitious with the uplift, but equally don't be too down on either. So there's an art in budgeting always, and now more than ever. Just look at it, try and make sure it's sensible. But all I'd say is write down kind of alongside it, if you are sharing it with people, kind of what your assumptions are. What have you taken into account whilst preparing this? And as long as it's something that you can, a budget's always there, especially for an external party, to start a conversation. So as long as you can justify you know, your metrics and what you've put in there, I think you'd be in quite a good place then just to kind of, you know, discuss it with people. So use something that will give you, you know, something to aim for going forwards, but equally it's a very difficult market right now to look at for something for 2 years. So do you really need to look that far ahead right now would be one of my questions. If you do, and like I say, it's for equity or debt raisers, then like I say, try and be realistic, but try and justify everything you're putting in there. And like I say, be realistic, but don't be too harsh. I hope that helps. It might not. So if it doesn't, please come back and I can answer something further.
Thank you, Andy. The next question from Rohan. So what additional credit checks and risk analysis should a financial institution carry out? And has Beehive incorporated some of them? It's a great question. And Suraj, if you don't mind answering that.
Sure, Saif. So given the current circumstances, I think it's pivotal for looking at enhanced credit checks and enhanced questions regarding the business model of or the current operations of a business. So during the start of COVID-19, you could find that the epicenter was more towards the China side, less towards the Europe side. So businesses who had interests or suppliers from those regions would be accordingly rated or scored. Now the tide has shifted a little bit, so accordingly the scoring models would change a little. We do still engage with clients over the mediums that are currently available and approved by the regulatory bodies to get connected. And yes, we are going very cautious in terms of what we are doing in terms of funding the businesses, in terms of helping the existing clients. But yes, the best part about our model or Beehive model is the fact that we are completely transparent with our customers, and the customers are completely transparent and reach out to us with a heads up if there are anything that is going on. Some of the clients are also doing good in the current circumstances because their business models or their operational activity was actually it was more of a serendipitical discovery kind of thing, but they found that their model was actually helpful in the current situation. Like one of the clients was dealing with CCTV cameras, and they could find access through their supplier for thermal scanning cameras, which is currently deployed at some of the major airports, some of the major shopping, malls and grocery shopping, supermarkets, hypermarkets. So there is business. Medical consumables have risen. So depending on the nature of business, yes, we do a lot more credit checks and verification and ask a lot more questions, and the clients are happy to do that. Yes. Does that answer, sir?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Suraj. I hope that covers the question for you, Rohan. A question from Steve, and I'll go to you, Andy, for this, if you don't mind. Will Beehive be introducing any new finance products for SMEs in light of the COVID-19 situation?
Yes, I think good question. Right now, it's a no. Obviously, we're always looking to bring new products to market, but right now, our main priority is looking after our current existing businesses and making sure we can support them as we need to through this difficult period, and making sure that especially our working capital finance facilities are still there and they're still at the levels that businesses need and require. So right now it's a no. We're always looking, like I say, to bring new products to market. So if something does come to market, obviously we'll be pushing that quite heavily so people will be aware. But right now we've got nothing. We're just looking for supporting our businesses.
Thanks, Andy. A question from Krishna, and this was also a question in the webinar that we had previously, so it's quite an important one. Has there been any VAT payment considerations made by the FTA, and if not, do we see one coming soon? Andy, if you wouldn't mind just touching on that and trying to shed some light on that one.
Yeah, sure. So there's been an announcement in the last couple of days with a deferment of submission and equally the payments for, I think, March and April's. So I believe it's just for monthly filers at the moment. That's the only thing that's been announced. So there may be more in the coming days, but right now I think it's just for March and April submissions. But again, it's not for everyone. You have to, we can put the links in after this as well, along with the information Geet is going to be sharing. And in there, it kind of details that, it should only be taken if it's necessary, and you need to speak with the FTA and kind of get their prior approval before doing so.
Great, thanks, Andy. I think, yes, if everybody just works off the assumption to continue paying their VAT payments just to avoid any sort of trouble from that end. And then just a final question for Suraj. During these times, obviously, there are many stimulus packages that are coming into the news. So I just wanted to ask you, sort of, how are banks helping SMEs to manage cash flow during these times?
Yeah, that's actually a very important point in the current timelines, given that most of the SMEs are struggling to see or get clarity in terms of the information. The central bank has actually given out initiatives and directives, which is driven by the banks to reach out to the SMEs in terms of extra funding, easing out their current debt repayments, adding more stimulus into the overall economy, releasing more projects. So last couple, I think a week back, there was an announcement that there were probably $15 billion worth of projects or dirhams worth of projects being released into the economy as part of the government initiatives. And I think just to touch base on one point is you have to reach out. So the banks are also working simultaneously to see how they can help the SME community. We are extensively working on that lines as well, but you need to reach out or reach back to the contact points in the respective banks to let them know the current situation. And if you need help in one way or the other, which can be included into their model of operation, they would definitely try to help you out. So communication would be the key. Reach out to the banks, reach out what you would look at as an appropriate support for helping you with the business continuity, and you would get supportive answers. So I would say that would be one good thing to do.
Thanks, Suraj. I think that's an important point as well. In order to be proactive with, making sure that you're communicating back to the banks, otherwise then these relief efforts could get lost in translation. So thanks for that. And just again for you, Suraj, it's a good question from Rohan. What are the positives for SMEs coming out of this situation?
Oh, wonderful. So I was actually planning to touch this point earlier, but I think I missed it out. So positives is, I could say a couple of them which comes to the top of my mind is innovating your business. I mean, giants like LVMH, which was able to move from perfume manufacturing to sanitizer manufacturing within a couple of weeks. And that's a bigger entity, whereas SMEs are like nimble, fast, the cheetahs of the ecosystem, if I may say so. And it's faster that SMEs can change or innovate in their business model. So just to quote an example, if you're a manufacturing company or if you're a chemicals company and you can find your supplier, provide you with the products that can help you create sanitizers if it is within your activity as per the DED, then you should look at that option. If you are a trading entity into medical consumables and you can look at bringing in say your license allows you to get in equipment, so ventilators could be one option you could look at. So there are multiple ways in which you can innovate your business right now without undergoing a lot of changes. And second point, which I would say is your digital engagement models. I believe a lot of SMEs don't look at digital engagements that seriously because they just feel that it's a point of contact or a touch point. But a digital engagement is what will be the future of businesses. So if you look at the current situation also, what we're doing is through a digital communication channel. And everything has been, what work has been happening seamlessly is through the digital channels. So getting yourself into the digital channels, finding yourself interesting topics to discuss with your clients, engaging your clients, attracting newer market segments will be much more economical, will be faster, and they might be the ones who might support in case if there are such future instances where you find it difficult to operate your business in the normal sense. So that is important. So I would say innovate your business, get digitally engaged, increase your collaborations, because networking always helps. I mean, given the current situation, there's no kind of demarcation between your professional and personal space because you're working from home pretty much. So try to collaborate as much as possible. People are free to pick up your calls. People are free to write emails. You can definitely look at future business options where you can increase your area of activities, increase your geographical presence through the current available options. So I would say encourage into getting into those. And one last point is getting yourself trained, increasing your skill sets, as well as increasing the skill sets of your employees. This can be achieved in multiple ways. As I was saying, you don't have to actually shell out a cost. You can look at a barter system kind of a deal where you're doing crisis management or something else for the training centers, and they would in turn teach you. Or there could be other forward-looking options that can be worked out. But I would say this is kind of a right time to upskill yourself, get your skill sets as per the digital requirements of the market. And once the market opens up again, that will increase your employability options. That will increase your options to get newer contracts with newer clients as well. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Suraj. And also a question from Yasser, and I believe the question's sort of alluding to, banks, aside from if you have a loan with them, what are they willing to do? Are there any sort of stimulus packages or grants that they're giving? And are there any sort of concrete measures that you can share with them that some banks perhaps are doing for non-existing customers?
So from my knowledge and understanding and correspondence with the friends from the banking sphere, what I understand is, yes, there are initiatives being given out by government institution, DEDs, Gadan 21, the different governments and the different partners of the SME ecosystem. It will be coming out soon in one form or the other. But yes, this is a completely new experience, if I may quote it, for many of the banking institutions, because this is something they haven't experienced before, and the way to manage shareholder expectations is not easy in the current time. So definitely there are initiatives which is being driven by the government through the banks and institutions to reach out more to the SMEs and help them with the current downturn. So I might say some of the names which you would also be reading around in the newspapers. I can share some of the links in terms of some of the initiatives and directives announced. But as of concrete movements from the banks, they are helping the existing clients because that is what they know more about. For new clients, they need to understand the client better. And given the current circumstances, they might also have to dig deeper into the business model. So conventional business models might not fare well in their assessment, whereas a digitally enabled or a digitally more prevalent business might be looked at positively given the current timelines. So it depends on what sector and sphere you work in. Yep.
Thank you, Suraj. And just finally, I think we'll wrap it up after this question. One more from Yasser. So you mentioned obviously extended credit terms with suppliers, but at the moment, a lot of suppliers seem to be changing their terms and conditions and reducing the credit period. What is there to be done in this case scenario, and are there any sort of ways to kind of avoid this from happening?
Yes, I mean they are also part of the ecosystem. They are seeing what is happening. There's a lot of dominoes effect coming into terms of the decisions that they're making. They might look at preserving cash themselves because that's how they need to function as a unit. But as I was suggesting earlier, look at long-term relationships. Give your suppliers more comfort that this is not a one-time solution that you're trying to fix, but rather a long-term solution which would benefit both the parties. So look at engaging yourself with certain suppliers where you feel there's more credibility, there's more support, and the risk factors, both geographically and business-wise, is not going to affect your business that adversely. Try to engage with them on a longer basis. That will increase their confidence. That will help them see your perspective as well, increase the credit terms or increase your credit line, or give you more flexibilities in the way you operate your business with the supplier. So that would be one good thing to look at. Second good thing would be to look at is you're working in this ecosystem and you have connections with your competitors, with your peers in the same industry sector. You're finding that, for example, some business of which is your competitor has suppliers from affected areas and are unable to ship or do the required supplies as per your timelines, connect them to your suppliers, saying that, and connecting each other. That will increase the revenue share for your supplier, easen out the pressures for your peers, and actually give you a good reputation, a good image in front of the suppliers, because you're trying to help their business as well. This might help in easing out the conversation, bringing in more credibility, and that way, so you might be able to get up some of the things that you're expecting through the conversation. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Suraj. Thank you very much for answering those questions. Thank you to the rest of the panel as well, Geeta and Andy, and to the audience. We hope it was, insightful. If you do have any further questions that were not answered, or would like to take anything up with the team at Beehive, please just fire us an email at team@beehive.ae. But otherwise, we hope, as I'm sure you all do, that businesses will pick up very, very soon. But otherwise, stay safe, everybody, and hopefully things will get back to normal before we know it. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.